Welcome to Rob on Holiday. Today we're in Venice in Italy and we're on a really quick break, a one night stop, and we're going to see how much we can pack in, so we're going to get started straight away. Venice, the city of canals, bridges and masks, is Italy's 12th largest city and the capital of the Veneto region. The floating city is one of Europe's most popular tourist destinations, with visitors flocking from all over the globe to see the city's wonderful architecture and experience its unique ambience. We visited Venice earlier this year, and in this video we'll be sharing everything we got to experience during our 36 hours in the city. Our trip started on Saturday morning with an early flight over to Venice Marco Polo Airport. From Manchester, the flight to Venice takes just over 2 hours. It was a clear morning, so we got a stunning view of the Dolomites below. Now, one important thing to know when you're planning your trip to Venice is that the airport is not located on the island of Venice itself. So once you land, you'll need to get some form of transport over to the island. The most popular option is to take a 30-minute water taxi. But as you can see by the queue to buy tickets for the boat at the airport, I don't think that this is the best option. Instead, we hopped in a taxi outside the terminal, and within 20 minutes we were driving across the Ponte della Liberta, the only road bridge connecting Venice to the mainland. You can also take a bus from the airport to Venice, which are both good alternatives. Our taxi dropped us off at the Piazzale Roma, which is the furthest point that road traffic is allowed onto the island. So we're ready to start the holiday to Venice now, and I've got to say this is a really good choice for a short break. We're only coming for one night, so what you want is to get from A to B really quickly, and we're literally 38 minutes after the aircraft wheels hit the runway arriving here. We're here in Venice. First thing we're going to do is going to buy some Vaporetto tickets. Boats are the only mode of transport in Venice, so our first stop once we arrived was to buy a 48-hour travel card. This card costs €30 per person and gets you unlimited travel on the Vaporettos across Venice. And trust me, buying your ticket here is a much better idea than buying it at the airport. There was a bit of a queue, but we only waited 10 minutes in total. Once we'd bought our tickets, we scanned in at the dock and soon boarded a Vaporetto headed towards the Rialto Bridge. The boat was crowded, but we still enjoyed our first views of the stunning canals of Venice. Our base for our one-night stay in Venice was the Hotel de Bruno, just a 5-minute walk from the Rialto Bridge. If you want to learn more about this hotel, check out our full review coming to the channel next Tuesday. Anyway, by the time we arrived in Venice, boarded the boat and checked in at our hotel, it was time for lunch. So we sat down at the Osteria al Pozzo Roverso and enjoyed some fantastic pizza and pasta dishes. It was the best way to kick off our trip to Venice. First impressions of Venice, wow, it's really busy. To be fair, I expected that. Getting out of the taxi right at the start of the island and queuing up for our Vaporetto tickets, it was absolutely mad. It was mad getting on the Vaporetto, it was mad getting off the Vaporetto, and most of the streets we've walked down so far have been crowded. But there are quieter places. We've just had a nice quiet lunch in a restaurant in a little square. Now we're looking at the gondolas going past here on one of the canals, and it is, it's reasonably quiet here, so you can find places where you can wander down the side of the canal and just soak up the atmosphere. After lunch we spent an hour exploring the Castello area of Venice. One of the best things to see in this area is the Church of St. George of the Greeks. The church's beautiful white facade and elegant leaning tower make for an impressive view at the canal's edge. We carried on further east until we reached the Arsenale of Venice. The Arsenale is a former shipyard that operated between the 12th and 18th centuries. You can actually book a tour to go inside, but we were happy just to explore the entrance area, which is definitely worth a visit. This is a beautiful spot, the eastern end of Venice, La Arsenale. The building's behind me now. It says that it's a military zone now. I'm guessing because of the name, it used to be a place where they repaired ships and maybe stored weapons. Now it's just a great building for tourists. There's a lovely canal section here with cafes, nice trees, a bridge over it, and it's a great spot for taking photos. From the Arsenale, we headed to the main waterfront in Venice. This area really had the vibe of a holiday resort, except of course you're in the middle of a city. Although we were tantalisingly close to St Mark's Square, we were actually saving our first view of Venice's crown jewel for later in the evening. So from the waterfront, we boarded another Vaporetto over to the Dorsoduro area of Venice.
Now this is an interesting aspect of the Vaporettos. We're not actually on the boat here, we're on a little floating pontoon, which is good because it's got a roof on, and so if it was raining then you could come and wait here for the boat. But the boat pulls up here, and in the meantime you just got to try and get your sea legs on the platform here as it's moving about all over the place. An interesting experience.
One of the main reasons for visiting this side of the Grand Canal is to see the Basilica Santa Maria della Salute. This beautiful Baroque church was built in the 17th century and is famous for its iconic dome, which can be seen all across the city. You can go inside the church for free, so although it's by no means the most impressive thing you'll see, it's worth a quick look if you're over in this part of the city.
We're across the other side of the Grand Canal now. Two of us got the Vaporetto across, but it was a bit choppy waiting on the pontoon, so two of our group walked round, went over the Accademia Bridge, and we met up here. We've just been inside the Basilica. It's a nice church inside. It's free to get in. You can pay an extra fee, which gets you in the sacristy. But the weather's taken a turn for the worse now, so we're hoping that we can still avoid the rain. Say we're stuck on the other side of the Grand Canal, so it's either a boat back over to the main part near San Marco, or a walk all the way down the canal and back across the Accademia Bridge. This is the real experience of being on a Vaporetto. Think sardines and a tin, you won't go far wrong.
Unfortunately, just as we were leaving the church, it started to rain, so we decided to catch the Vaporetto back to the Rialto Bridge. Despite the rain, the Rialto Bridge still looks stunning. An icon of Venice, this bridge is actually the oldest of the 4 bridges that cross the Grand Canal. The bridge also doubles as a marketplace with stores lining both sides.
This is the famous Rialto Bridge, and it spans the Grand Canal in Venice. If you come in from where the train station is at the start of the island, or you get a taxi there, you get a water boat, Vaporetto, around here. You go right under the Rialto Bridge and further around the Grand Canal into Venice. It's very packed with people, sometimes 4 people deep at the railings on both sides of the bridge. So we've come down to like a stone quay on the side and get a good view of the bridge. I think you can appreciate it a bit better away from the crowds.
Since the rain was setting for a few hours, we decided that it was the right time to head back to our hotel for a rest, especially since we'd been up since the early hours. After an hour's break, we headed back out to the Rialto Bridge to get some pictures in the dry weather before heading for dinner. We had pre-booked a restaurant for dinner, but there are so many places to choose from that I'm sure you wouldn't have a problem finding delicious food even if you didn't plan ahead. We'd booked a table at Rosso Pomodoro, located halfway between our hotel and St Mark's Square.
We just had a very good meal at Rosso Pomodoro here in Venice. If you're after pizzas, pasta, great meal, had a nice tiramisu to finish off. Good atmosphere, so it's worth checking this place out if you want to eat here.
Our energy replenished, we headed to our final stop of the night, the most famous spot in Venice, St Mark's Square.
Now, technically, it isn't my first visit to St Mark's Square because I came here as a 14-year-old. We came on holiday to Lido di Jesolo. I came to St Mark's Square for a couple of hours, but really this is first impressions, and I'm actually coming out, and it's amazing. St Mark's Basilica on the front there, really ornate artwork and all the statuary, and also the Campanile, the bell tower here. It's a fantastic sight. Now, we had a bit of rain here in Venice today, but not anything like as much that would put you off coming. But sometimes it really does get heavy rain here in Venice, and the sea floods over into St Mark's Square. You see all these boards, they look like big tables, but what it is, they put these out and you can actually walk on top of the board so you don't get your feet wet, depending on how deep the water gets, of course. But I think you can get flooding here around October, November time. That's the time when you might be in danger of having a lot of water here. So if you're going to come to Venice, check out the weather, what's the best time to come and what's the best time to avoid.
St Mark's Square truly lives up to its reputation. The square is lined on all sides by beautiful buildings, including the stunning St Mark's Basilica, the elegant Doge's Palace, and the majestic Campanile. Watching the sunset in the square was one of the highlights of our trip, and something I highly recommend you do when in Venice.
Now, while you may pay big money to stay at a hotel here in Venice, and it is really expensive to stay at the hotels in the city centre, especially the San Marco area, you do get advantages of spending the night here. I mean, it's a lot quieter in the evening than it is in the day. And you can walk around San Marco Piazza here and get a feel for the place. You walk around, and there's not big crowds. And we're hoping to walk down some canals as well, see what it's like along the canals at this time of the evening, to show you what it's like and what you get if you stay here in the city centre overnight. Walking around at night at Venice is interesting. I mean, obviously the main areas like St. Mark's Square and the side of the water is all lit up like you would expect. What I would expect more places like the quieter streets to be more lit at night. I mean, obviously there are restaurants and bars open, a few shops still open, but generally it's very quiet, which means you can get a lot of walks via atmospheric canals, and you come across something like this, which is just a lovely quaint bridge across the canal. Apart from there is a light actually up there, but it's generally no lighting, and you're just kind of left to your own devices to wander the streets. Very atmospheric. And a nice change from in the day where a lot of places are very busy.
And so, after a wonderful first day in Venice, we headed back to our hotel for a much needed night's sleep.
Good morning. Today is our first full day in Venice, but actually it's our last day in Venice because we fly home tonight. I did say it was only a short trip. Nevertheless, it's just after 8:30 on a Sunday morning, and you can see that it's actually quite quiet in Piazza San Marco. So this is definitely a good time to come and get photographs and selfies and just generally walk around and take in the fantastic buildings on offer here, because it's going to get a lot busier later in the day.
We spent about half an hour exploring St. Mark's Square in the morning sunshine. Making the effort to get up early was worth it because the square was fairly quiet and we got some great pictures as we explored.
Now, I almost feel like I don't have to say this because it's repeated everywhere when you read it in tourist information. Well, this is the Bridge of Sighs that connects the Doge's Palace to, I don't know what this building is, but it used to be a prison. And of course, it's called the Bridge of Sighs because the prisoners used to walk from the Doge's Palace across the bridge and get their last sight of Venice. And that's where the name, the Sighs, come from, the Bridge of Sighs. The next stop today is the Isola San Giorgio di Maggiore, St. George's Island. Now, it's a good point to mention the Vaporetto service again, because there are so many docks here in Venice running all along the waterfront, and depending on where you want to go and also which direction you want to go in, there's a different dock. So in this case, we're going to San Zaccaria Dock B, because the number 2 Vaporetto service that starts further down that way stops here at San Zaccaria B, and the next stop is the San Giorgio Island. The Vaporetto service itself runs every 12 minutes. We've just seen one leave, which is a shame, but it means that we've got 12 minutes, less than 12 minutes to wait for the next one. So we're going to head out onto the pier now, get ready to go across to St. George's Island.
Venice is surrounded by a number of other islands, and if you're staying in the city for longer than a weekend, it's definitely worth planning a trip to visit some of these islands.
So this is just to show that the Vaporetto service isn't always crowded like sardines. Of course, this is quite early, it's about 9:15. It's the service that leaves the San Zaccaria B dock, heading over for the Isola San Giorgio di Maggiore. A very pleasant way to start the day.
While we didn't have time to venture very far, we did want to get off the main island so that we could get a good view back over to St. Mark's Square. And San Giorgio Maggiore is a great place to do just that. The island is just a 3-minute Vaporetto ride from St. Mark's Square, and as soon as you step off the boat, you're greeted with that iconic shot back over the water.
Now this is absolutely fabulous. We've got the Vaporetto over to the Isola San Giorgio Maggiore, St. George's Island. And I already said it's early in the day, to be fair, but look how quiet it is. There's hardly anybody else here. And in addition to the church we're going to go in, and the bell tower, Campanile, we're going to climb, we've got this magnificent view across to Venice, and on a day like this where the sun's shining, it really is worth it, because you can see all the way across to the Santa Maria Basilica, and then of course St. Mark's Square over there, the bell tower Campanile there, the Doge's Palace, the Bridge of Sighs. You can see it all. You've got the waterfront laid out before, you've got all different kind of boats and ferries going past. It's absolutely fantastic, definitely worth coming over here to the island if you're in Venice.
And we weren't just coming over to the island for the views. San Giorgio Maggiore is named after the 16th century church located on the island. Entry to the church is free, and since it had just turned 10 AM, we basically had the place to ourselves. The church is beautifully decorated inside, but the highlight of the visit for us was the journey up to the bell tower. Tickets for the tower cost just €8 and they can't be booked online, but we had no problem since we arrived so early. There is a lift that takes you most of the way up the tower, and once you get to the top you will be rewarded with a 360-degree panoramic view of the entire city.
Here we are at the top of the bell tower at St George's Island. Now let me make a case for you coming across here if you haven't already been convinced by what you've seen so far. It's a fantastic view, all Venice spread out before you here. Now we were considering going up the famous bell tower in St Mark's Square, which obviously you can see from here. We thought, well, if we go up that bell tower, you're so close to the square, you're not seeing the view of Venice itself. So if you come across to the St George's Island here, and then you come up the bell tower here, you can see the main parts of the city that way. And you've got a fantastic view of the Alps as well over there. I mean, you couldn't really ask for much more of a view. A few things worth mentioning about this. It's €8 each for a ticket, and you can buy them on the day. That's what we've done when we've just turned up today. But it's important to note they accept cash only. So make sure you've got some euros with you if you're making the effort to come across to the island. But honestly, it's worth doing. It's one of the best things in Venice.
We enjoyed our time on the island so much that we decided to explore a little more before heading back to the centre of Venice. The island offers a different and much quieter perspective of Venice, which made it the perfect place to spend the morning. If you take one tip away from this video, make sure you visit San Giorgio Maggiore Island on your trip to Venice.
Now this is a nice pleasant surprise of San Giorgio Island. I didn't know until we turned up there's actually a cafe here as well. So instead of going with the masses in St Mark's Square, we decided to have our morning cappuccino here, looking out over the water back towards the main area of Venice.
We boarded a Vaporetto back to the Grand Canal just after 11 AM, and we next headed to a rather controversial Venetian bridge.
This is the Accademia Bridge. Now I've heard people say that it doesn't look great, but I think it looks nice. It's like an iron bridge but coated in some nice wooden beams. And the thing about this bridge, you get fantastic views down the Grand Canal. Let's go and check it out. See what I mean? On the Accademia Bridge, I mean, I like the bridge itself anyway, but the view is great. This is probably the best view of the Grand Canal in Venice.
We had booked tickets for St Mark's Basilica and the Doge's Palace in the afternoon, so we gradually made our way back towards the square. Now, I'm a planner, so I don't usually say this, but one of the best things to do in Venice is to just wander and get lost in its maze of streets, canals and bridges. On our way back to St Mark's Square, we saw so many beautiful corners of the city that we would never have singled out in a guidebook.
Walking around Venice, you will see lots of church towers. And of course, a lot of them are leaning. Look at this one behind me here. And it makes sense because when you think Venice itself is built into the lagoon and the soft silt. So I guess some of the buildings are going to tilt, but it does make for an interesting spectacle as you walk around seeing the various towers around the city.
We made a quick pit stop on our way back to St Mark's Square to see another of the city's famous buildings.
This is an architectural gem in Venice, right in the San Marco district. It is Scala Contarini del Bovolo. You can pay a small fee to go up the tower, but we've done enough going up towers and walking around today. So we just come to photograph it and admire it from the bottom. It's free to get in here, the little garden area. Definitely come and see this, well worth it. Something here worth seeing, just look at this. The Sottobottego Calais Coppo. Now, we've seen lots of these walking around Venice. Didn't know anything about them before we arrived, but there seem to be little passages that run under the houses next to the canals. It was really useful for us yesterday when it was raining because we were able to hide out in one while the heaviest rain was passing. But they're also useful for getting from A to B, just cutting around corners. Let's have a look in here. I've actually picked a very good one to film. I mean, they don't all end with magnificent views like this, but it's worth checking a few of them out if you're walking around the streets. It's also interesting that in these days of health and safety, there's quite a few streets in Venice, like this one through the Sottobottego, that end like this, so be careful.
When in Italy, it's essential to have some gelato, and we just had enough time to pop into one of the gelaterias just off St Mark's Square before it was time to enter the Doge's Palace. Something worth mentioning about Venice is that tickets for all the attractions sell out quickly. We're quite organised, and even we were too late to book the Doge's Palace and St Mark's Basilica through the official websites. But luckily, we were able to book tickets for both attractions through Get Your Guide. We would always recommend booking through the attraction's official website, but if that isn't possible, we've always had a good experience with Get Your Guide.
This is a Palazzo Ducale, or the Doge's Palace. We paid €30 for the prepaid tickets here. Looks like we can get in. There is an entrance around the front. I don't know what the difference is between the two. Let's see if we can get in there with our tickets. I was dubious whether it was worth paying €30 to come in and see the Doge's Palace, given that you can walk around and see it from the outside. Well, I've just stepped inside. This is 1 minute into the visit, and I have to say, it's a superb start. Look at this.
The Doge's Palace is the former seat of the Venetian Republic, but it's perhaps most well known for being connected to the city's prison by the Bridge of Sighs. There has been a palace on this site since the 9th century, but the current Gothic palace was built between the 14th and 16th centuries. Tickets to visit the palace cost €30, allowing you to visit the palace's lavish interiors and even walk over the famous Bridge of Sighs yourself.
This is one of the many rooms within the Doge's Palace, and I wanted to make a specific point here because last year we visited Rome and we were disappointed with the Sistine Chapel. I mean, obviously the Sistine Chapel is world famous. We paid a lot of money to get into the Vatican museums, but it was so busy. It wasn't really an enjoyable experience, and when we got in the Sistine Chapel, it was absolutely packed like a football match, and there was basically a bloke shouting out, "Silencio, silencio," telling us to be quiet. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is, this is the much less famous Doge's Palace, but the paintings in here are just as amazing as Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. I mean, just look at this painting behind me here. You could stare at these for hours. And this is just one of about 4 or 5 rooms like this we've been in. Big cavernous rooms with lots of paintings on the walls and ceilings. So I think, whilst I'm more interested in the architecture, the €30 you pay for the Duke's Palace, the Doge's Palace, sorry, to actually see the palace courtyard outside and to come in and see all these rooms, and it's quite a relaxed atmosphere. I think it's really good.
After exploring the palace, it was time to make the journey over to the prison via the Bridge of Sighs, just as the prisoners did centuries ago.
So we followed a sign that said complete tour of the full prison. So I think we're going to spend 5 minutes down here. You can just see more prison cells before you go back over the Bridge of Sighs. But it's interesting to see the kind of conditions we're talking about here. Just 2 very flat, hard wooden beds in the cell here.
We spent about an hour exploring the Doge's Palace and the prison, and it was another highlight of our visit to Venice.
The 2 most expensive things we've done since we've been here in Venice are paid €35 for the Vaporetto tickets, that was for 48 hours, and the Doge's Palace. This has cost us €30, which we booked in advance. But it is a really good value, well, not value for money, I would say it's worth doing. The Doge's Palace is mainly split into 3 areas. You've got lots of wood-panelled rooms to walk around. You've got this magnificent courtyard at the start and the end of the visit. And you've also got the prison section, and you get to walk around the old cells. And most importantly, you get to walk across the Bridge of Sighs and get the view of Venice that the prisoners who walked across inside, and that's how the bridge got its name. So, like I say, quite a bit of money, but you can spend an hour and a half, 2 hours here in the Doge's Palace, and you do see a lot of things. When we come on a city break, we almost always book tickets in advance. I mean, okay, there are some things we pay in on the day, but the major attractions, we always make sure we secure our tickets well before we're travelling. And this is the reason why. This is the queue for St Mark's Basilica, just before 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I've never seen a queue like this. You can see it growing. People are joining the queue all the time, and the queue's just getting longer and longer. A few minutes ago it was here, and now it's starting to go back out to the water. And it's still quite a long way to the front. I mean, to be fair, they are moving quite fast, but I think you've probably got half an hour, 45-minute wait from down here. but we've just seen the skip the line queue that we paid for, and there was actually nobody in it. So it's definitely worth booking in advance.
The final stop on our tour of Venice was to step inside St. Mark's Basilica. Built in the 9th century, St. Mark's Basilica is the most visited tourist attraction in Venice. Tickets to go inside cost just €3. Photography is not allowed inside, but we'll insert a stock photo here to give you an idea of what it looks like.
So St. Mark's Basilica, it's very pretty inside, quite low lighting, marble stonework everywhere, and it's been, the paintings are on the stonework. In all honesty, I think it's one of those cathedrals where I think the outside is much better than the inside. I mean, we paid €8 each for the ticket. We were only in there 10 minutes, so of course it's worth seeing if you come to Venice, but there are better cathedrals inside in Italy and in Spain and other places.
Even though St. Mark's had been our intended last stop, we did have time for a bit of a walk along the waterfront again before heading for an early dinner. We couldn't leave Venice without one last pizza, so we headed to 1000 Gourmet, an Italian restaurant located just 5 minutes from St. Mark's Square. The food here was excellent and a great way to end our trip to Venice.
So that's the end of our short trip to Venice, and we've packed a lot in just over 24 hours. Before I came to Venice, I was really excited to see the big sites, the well-known sites like St. Mark's Square, the Rialto Bridge and all the canals. But it's really surprised me in the little other highlights that I didn't really know about. For example, going across to San Giorgio Island and going up the bell tower there and seeing the view back over Venice was fantastic. Going along some of the smaller canals, like where the Greek church is next to the canal and the lovely blue water there, that was a real highlight for me. And I enjoyed going out to see the Arsenale area as well. And I think you can find lots of quiet corners in Venice where you turn the corner and just the view down the street looks really nice. And then obviously the same goes for the canals. There's just so much to see here, but not having cars and bikes like you're having to watch them all the time, that's been a refreshing change. All you've got to look out for are gondolas, but obviously they're going underneath the bridges, so they're not going to run you over. It's a really relaxing city to walk around. It gets very busy on the Vaporettos. That's the one area where I'd say, it does feel hustly and bustling. You think, what am I doing here in amongst all this madness? But it's a small price to pay to get around Venice, and it's really worth visiting this city because there are so many architectural highlights. Thanks for watching Rob on Holiday. We hope you enjoyed watching our trip to Venice. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments below, and we'll be happy to answer them. In the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here next time.